Have you ever faced people who twist the truth to suit their own desires? What do you do when your faith is under attack from within your own community? The book of Jude is short but powerful. It calls believers to stand firm, defend the truth, and remain faithful. In a world full of deception, Jude reminds us that vigilance, discernment, and courage are essential for every follower of Christ. Overview. Jude reminds us that vigilance, discernment, and Jude, the brother of James and likely a half-brother of Jesus, wrote this letter to early Christians facing false teachers infiltrating the church. These individuals were perverting the gospel, living immorally, and threatening to lead others astray. Jude's message is urgent. Believers must contend for the faith, actively protect the truth of the gospel while living holy, godly lives. He combines warnings, encouragement, and reminders of God's power to help believers remain steadfast. Despite the threats, Jude reassures his readers that God is able to keep them secure and that ultimate victory belongs to him. Historical and social context. The early church Jude addresses was small, vulnerable, and likely scattered across several communities. False teachers were not just a theoretical danger, they were real, influential, and persuasive. Jude emphasizes that faith requires vigilance. Believers must discern truth from deception, avoid compromise, and actively protect the integrity of the gospel. The letter reflects the tension of maintaining faithfulness while facing moral and doctrinal threats. Key themes in Jude. Contending for the faith. Believers must actively defend the gospel, resisting deception and false teachings. Warning against false teachers. Jude warns that some people pervert God's grace, live immorally, and exploit others. God's justice and judgment. Those who rebel against God will face judgment. This provides both warning and reassurance for faithful believers. Building faith and spiritual maturity. Believers are called to grow in holiness, mercy, and love while keeping themselves in God's protection. Hope and protection in God. Despite the threats, God is able to keep believers from falling and present them blameless before His glory. Key verses in Jude. Jude 1 verse 3, contend earnestly for the faith that was once for all delivered to the saints. Jude 1 verse 4, be aware of ungodly people who pervert God's grace and deny Jesus Christ. Jude 1 verses 5 to 6, remember God's judgment in history, He punishes those who rebel. Jude 1 verse 7, God's judgment falls on immorality and rebellion, as illustrated by Sodom and Gomorrah. Jude 1 verses 17 to 18, remember the warnings of the apostles about scoffers in the last times. Jude 1 verses 20 to 21, build yourselves up in faith, pray in the Spirit, and keep yourselves in God's love. Jude 1 verses 22 to 23, show mercy to those who doubt, rescue others with discernment. Jude 1 verse 24, God is able to keep believers from stumbling and present them blameless before His glory. Jude 1 verse 25, to Him be glory, majesty, dominion, and authority, forever. Jude 1 verse 25, a doxology that reminds believers of God's eternal power and faithfulness. Relevance Today. Jude speaks directly to modern believers navigating misinformation, moral compromise, and internal challenges in communities of faith. It highlights the importance of discernment, vigilance, and active faith. In contemporary life, we face influences that distort truth, encourage selfishness, or normalize compromise. Jude reminds Christians to stand firm, act wisely, and trust God's protection while living holy lives. Closing thought. Jude reminds us that faith is not passive. Believers must defend the gospel, care for one another, and remain steadfast under pressure. God's power and glory secure our faith, even in the face of deception and adversity. If your spiritual life feels threatened or you see compromise around you, Jude challenges you to contend for the faith, walk in holiness, and trust God's protection and ultimate justice.